Over the course of the past few months, we've done some interviews with doctors and nurses about the COVID-19 pandemic. But today we've got someone who actually had COVID-19. Dave Shook. He works in the oil and gas industry as an engineer, and he has an interesting story about how he got COVID and just how nasty this bug is. So welcome to the interview, Dave.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I read your Facebook posts about your experience with COVID-19, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Why don't you tell us how you got it, and then we'll talk about what it was like.
Sure. So on Wednesday, November 18th, I had lunch with a friend. Since the beginning of the pandemic, this was the fourth time that I sort of broke protocol, that I was not wearing a mask while close to a person in my bubble. He was not symptomatic at the time. He got symptoms the next day, so that was Thursday the 19th. He went and got tested on the 19th. He got a positive result on the 21st. I isolated on the 21st. I got tested on the 22nd. I got my positive result on the 23rd, and I started feeling crappy on the 24th. So about 6 days from exposure to onset of symptoms. And on the 24th, I started feeling tired. And I got sicker and more tired. Just more and more fatigue initially, until about the fourth day or so of symptoms, when and I started developing kind of a runny nose, post-nasal drip thing that ended up producing, a gunk in my lungs. So I started coughing, and it started getting really bad on about the Friday, the 27th. And from then, for the next almost week, I would cough and cough and cough and cough until I would throw up. And I also had diarrhea at the same time, which meant that some of those coughing, vomiting incidents were terrifying, because there's a lot of force going on in your torso at that time. So it was horrible. I could keep down no food from about the 27th or so until the 2nd or 3rd. And the only reason I was able to start keeping food down was I got a prescription for an antiemetic, like an anti-vomiting medication, from our family doctor. We have a great family doctor. And as soon as I got the positive result, he phoned me and he gave me his personal cell phone number so I could text him. And my wife also got COVID from me. So she got sick about 2 or 3 days after me. Fortunately, she didn't end up with the vomiting, but she ended up with a dry cough and tons of fatigue. And I was really dehydrated by the time I got that prescription on the 2nd. So much so my wife's best friends are nurses, and one of them was threatening to come over and give me an IV because it was either that or go to hospital.
So you were right on the edge of having to go to the hospital.
Absolutely.
And as I understand, your wife is immuno-compromised. She has another issue.
Yeah.
And I know, if I may share this, Dave, you were pretty upset that you had I had given it to her.
Oh yeah, no, it was very upsetting. My wife, and we have 2 adult children who live with us. They have been rigorous since the beginning of the outbreak. That they wear masks when they go outside the house. They're very careful about their interactions. They've curtailed a bunch of their courses so that they aren't having to meet people in person. And I, through what was basically, I just wanted to see a friend, ended up getting sick, and more importantly, putting my wife in physical danger and my kids in danger as well. And it was really dumb, right? Because it was, I needed to give him something and he needed to give me something back, but there was no real excuse for this. It was just, I wanted to see a friend and have lunch with him.
And, so here's an example of a family that is really taking this seriously and makes one mistake.
That's right.
And as a consequence, suffers with the illness, and also endangers family members inadvertently, of course, but endangers family members. And we can only, if you multiply that over the course of, you live in Calgary, Edmonton, right?
Edmonton, yeah.
Edmonton. So multiply it over the course of a city, the riskiness of some of the behavior we're seeing, a lot of the behavior we're seeing, is just inexplicable.
Oh yeah, it's incomprehensible. Like right now, one, I shouldn't have done this. There's no question that I should not have done this. It was not banned at the time, but it was profoundly unwise, right? And if you, the worst bit is that as an engineer, we're used to assessing risk and making risk-based decisions, right? So it goes like this. At the time, the chance that the gentleman I was having lunch with, that he had COVID, was about 1 in 1,000. Because about 1 Edmontonian in 1,000 had COVID at the time. It's gone up since then. The chance of me dying if I get COVID is at least 1%, because I'm in my mid-50s, right? The chance of my wife dying if she got COVID, or being seriously debilitated for a long term, dying might be 1 or 2%, seriously debilitated, probably about 50%, right, for 8 months or so. So as an engineer, from any sort of risk assessment point of view, 1 in 1,000 times a 2% chance of death is well above the acceptable threshold for any sort of industrial decision making around risk of an industrial death, right? And
well, hang on a second. I want to jump in here, because when you say well above, to the layman like me, maybe explain what that means.
Okay, so in industrial risk decision making, you use a matrix of probability range and consequence, right? So the probability range is like 1 in 10 per year, 1 in 100 per year, 1 in 1,000 per year, and so on. And then the consequence is things like a first aid, which is where you get a cut and need a Band-Aid.
Right.
Medical aid, which is where you need stitches. Restricted work, lost time, permanently disabling, death, right? And of course, industrially, you cannot completely eliminate risk. But what you can do is you can reduce the likelihood of any of these negative consequences by, first trying to get rid of the risk entirely. Secondly, administrative controls, training, safety systems, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Right. And most companies have got a number for what the acceptable risk is of a death or permanently disabling injury. And it tends to be around a 1 in 100,000 years or 1 in a million years. And it's actually lower than that because we always underestimate the effectiveness of the controls that bring that down. But the point is, you can't get it to 0, but you can get it down to a low enough number that it's practically speaking 0. And the only time bad things are really going to happen is when 2 or 3 of the safety systems fail, right? And that's why if you ever look at an industrial incident where someone dies, a minimum of 2 safety rules have been broken. Anyway.
Okay, so let's put this into context for we laymen. So yeah. Are you saying that if you use your risk assessment matrix, the risk that you took going out with your friend to have lunch was much higher than it should be in an industrial context? Significantly higher. Would not have been permitted in an industrial context. Yes. Dave, that's actually a very interesting insight. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for this. And hopefully, you will help some people with their own risk matrix. Well, just to let you know, I first started feeling symptoms 28 days ago, and I am still exhausted. I haven't worked a full day yet, and I'm not gonna for a while. I put in about 1 hour a day of work. Get out of bed, make breakfast, lie down. Have a shower, get dressed, lie down. That's what my life is like, and that's 2 weeks after I'm recovered from COVID. Wow. Well, there's yet another lesson we can take from your story. Thank you very much for this. You're welcome.